You may have noticed a recent trend of people filming themselves in public while pretending to be video game non-player characters, aka NPCs. But what if they aren't pretending? There's a concept in philosophy known as the philosophical zombie, or P-zombie for short. A P-zombie is a being that is physically identical to a human in every way except that it lacks any conscious experience. Essentially, a human robot, but one that is still made of the same biological matter. This is a captivating thought experiment because I think most of us have at one point or another had the realization that it's impossible to know for sure what it's like to be inside someone else's mind. As much as their actions suggest to us that they are having an experience similar to our own with their own unique thoughts and emotions, there's the uncanny possibility that only you are actually conscious. Only you are the main character. In The Truman Show, Jim Carrey plays a man who is the unknowing main character in a reality TV show, and all the people he interacts with are merely actors following scripts. But underneath the facades, they're all still human beings, and at times the cracks show through as they can't help but empathize with Truman. In Westworld, and there will be some spoilers for this show if anyone is still worried about that, people get to become the main characters at a theme park and participate in a wide variety of adventures with highly advanced NPC androids that are virtually indistinguishable from real humans. But as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the goal of the park has more to do with understanding the behavior of the human participants than it does with showcasing the technology of the robotic hosts. The simulation hypothesis puts forth the idea that we are in fact all living in a simulated reality, and furthermore, it is more likely than not that all of us are simulated conscious beings that only exist within a computer. This is kind of wild for a number of reasons, but one of the crazier aspects of it is the suggestion that it's possible to simulate consciousness, and that it's possible that the conscious experience you're having right now is merely the result of that simulation. In the obvious pop culture analogy to this theory, which I didn't feel like I needed to spell out because everyone automatically thinks of it anyway, most of humanity is indeed living in a simulation. But aside from the various computer programs, most of the people you encounter in this simulation are real, conscious humans. They just happen to be living in vats. I think a darker version of the Matrix would be one where Neo is the only human still alive, and the only people he gets to interact with are AIs within the simulation. If he ever wakes up in his pod, all he will be greeted by are more machines. As Westworld progresses, some of the characters you believe to be human turn out to instead be androids. Imagine spending weeks in a park like that, forming bonds with people you believe to be fellow guests, only to discover they were all just hosts. Imagine a version of The Truman Show where he lives his whole life on the set and never discovers the truth. Then again, I guess it wouldn't really matter if you never knew the difference. But are you actually the main character? Are you the actual human with consciousness and free will? There's a scene in Westworld where one of the hosts, who is programmed to believe that she's human, is shown a readout of all the things she's about to say and do and is forced to confront the truth about who she really is. What if there was a device you could attach to the human brain that would show a similar readout? Minority Report is a 2002 film in which Tom Cruise uses this sweet gesture-controlled screen technology that everyone hoped would someday exist and now actually kind of does in the form of the Apple Vision Pro, but more relevant to this video, it also featured these three people floating in tanks who could predict murders before they happened. And while psychic vat dwellers that can predict the future will most likely remain in the realm of science fiction, imagine if someday in the future it was possible for a law enforcement agency to scan your brain and know with near perfect accuracy that you would someday commit murder or other serious crimes. If this was the case, we'd probably need to radically reshape the way we think about moral responsibility and the concept of free will. In his 2023 book, Determined: A Science of Life Without Free Will, neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky argues that we need to radically reshape the way we think about moral responsibility and the concept of free will. Sapolsky makes the case that human behavior is almost entirely explained by biological processes. What we do, the choices we make, the people who we ultimately become are all the result of a long chain of causality, including our genes, the environment we were raised in, as well as the day-to-day fluctuations of various hormones. And while Sapolsky doesn't have a magical brain scanner to shock you into an existential crisis, his conclusion is emphatically that there is no such thing as free will. Of course, the question of free will is a long-standing debate in philosophy, and there are many in the philosophical and scientific communities who disagree with Sapolsky. To me, whether or not free will can be said to exist depends entirely on how you define free will. Sapolsky's definition is fairly strict. He asks those who believe in free will to show me that the thing a neuron just did in someone's brain was unaffected by preceding factors. In other words, he wants you to show him an action that happened independent of prior causes. If you believe in the concept of determinism, essentially everything that happens in the universe is akin to a long chain of dominoes, starting with the Big Bang and culminating in this moment right now. But other philosophers, such as Daniel Dennett, don't think that a belief in determinism means there's no such thing as free will. He believes that our subjective perception of making choices and controlling our actions is a valid expression of the kind of freedom worth wanting. Dennett's views are usually known in philosophical lingo as compatibilism, which is a view held by a majority of modern philosophers. By contrast, Sapolsky is a self-proclaimed hard incompatibilist. If all this is making your head spin, I wouldn't worry about it too much because, in my view, many discussions of free will are inherently paradoxical. A lot of the time, it seems like these debates all boil down to, I think we should define free will like this, and by that definition, it doesn't exist. Or, I think we should define free will like this, and by that definition, it does exist. Perhaps the most obvious argument for the existence of free will is that, at least most of the time, most of us feel like we have it. As I sit here writing this script, it feels like I can choose to write whatever I want. I can take a break and stretch a little, or even do a little weird interpretive dance move with my hands. And as you sit here watching this video, it probably feels like you're free to do whatever you want. You can keep watching, or get bored and do something else. You can click the subscribe button just down there, or you could hover your cursor over it and then cruelly pull it away again without subscribing. But free will deniers would claim this is just the illusion of free will. If you're familiar with popular optical illusions, then you know that even when, for example, it is demonstrated that the lines are the same length, your brain still can't help but see one as longer. Simply knowing it's an illusion doesn't prevent you from being tricked by it. And I'd imagine most people who have become convinced that free will is an illusion don't wake up in the morning and feel like they are just helplessly watching some robot body live out their lives. Their subjective experience is still one of making choices. However, popular and sometimes controversial author, philosopher, neuroscientist, creator of the Waking Up meditation app, and noted free will denier, Sam Harris, has claimed to be able to, through his meditation practice, subjectively perceive the absence of free will.
It completely unravels the apparent mystery of free will, because people think that the mystery is we know we have it because we feel it very deeply. Subjectively, it's a truth about us. Yet objectively, it's hard to map onto the causality of things. But if you pay close enough attention to what it's like to be you, that is, i.e., meditate, you can notice that it's not even a subjective truth about you because everything just arises.
Now, I have a few problems with this framing, but I do think it's worth at least briefly considering what Sam is saying. I've dabbled in a bit of meditation, and I do feel that practicing various forms of mindfulness can help you to perceive the chaotic nature of your own mind. Much of the time, you really don't know the next thought you're about to think or the next impulse you're going to act on. Why do you sometimes have the willpower to resist certain temptations, while other times you helplessly succumb to them? Sapolsky and other behavioral scientists can provide clues about the hidden forces that affect what we do, but on any given day, in any given moment, from the perspective of a conscious human mind, it can all just feel like a strange confluence of, on the one hand, perfectly precise control of motor functions and incredible agency to shape the course of our lives, but on the other, a sense of helplessness as the chaotic pushes and pulls of nature simply wash over us. But does it matter whether you call this strange confluence proof of the absence of free will or evidence of the incredible freedom that comes with being human? In recent years, the term NPC has taken on a bit of a sordid history. This meme in particular became a go-to for far-right agitators who used it as a pejorative for supposedly brainwashed left-leaning people, culminating in 2018 when Twitter banned a proliferation of NPC accounts who had begun to spam the site with tongue-in-cheek liberal talking points. The conspiracy site InfoWars even held a competition for the creation of NPC memes, with the winning entry being reposted on Twitter by then-President Donald Trump. But used outside of a political context, I think an NPC is more just someone who acts in a very predictable manner, who follows the crowd. A sheeple, if you will. In David Foster Wallace's famous commencement speech, "This is Water," he paints a vivid portrait of the mind-numbing nature of day-to-day existence after college graduation. He describes fighting through traffic at the end of a tough workday in order to get to the grocery store and squeeze in some shopping, and then upon finally reaching the store, having to fight your way through throngs of other hurried, tired people, only to get stuck in an overly crowded checkout line. Quote, "And look at how repulsive most of them are, and how stupid and cow-like and dead-eyed and non-human they seem in the checkout line. Or at how annoying and rude it is that people are talking loudly on cell phones in the middle of the line. And look at how deeply and personally unfair this is." I can spend time in the end-of-the-day traffic being disgusted about all the huge, stupid, lane-blocking SUVs and Hummers and V12 pickup trucks burning their wasteful, selfish 40-gallon tanks of gas, and I can dwell on the fact that the patriotic or religious bumper stickers always seem to be on the biggest, most disgustingly selfish vehicles, driven by the ugliest. At this point, Wallace pauses as the crowd bursts into applause and then quickly corrects them. This is an example of how not to think. Wallace's point is that our default setting is to view everyone else as mere NPCs getting in our way. He encourages us to remember that if someone acts rudely towards us, they may not simply be a bad person, they could be a very good person who's simply having a very bad day. Stuck in traffic, we rage about why all these people are going the same way as us, forgetting that we are also the traffic. We forget that everyone is the main character of their own story. Main character syndrome is a term that has recently gotten popular enough to apparently warrant its own article on this health website. I don't really think this needs an explanation, but according to Cleveland Clinic, main character syndrome is defined by a series of behaviors in which you see yourself as the main character in the story of your life. You are the protagonist, and everyone else is often a sidekick or a villain. The article later explains that certain aspects of main character syndrome are often closely related to behaviors associated with narcissistic personality disorder. And while it does seem like most of the time this is just used to refer to people acting a bit self-centered or doing something ridiculous in public, maybe the worst, most extreme version of main character syndrome would be akin to full-on psychopathy, where you essentially see other people as nothing more than disposable pedestrians and your life as one big game of Grand Theft Auto. In Free Guy, Ryan Reynolds plays a man who is literally an NPC in an online Grand Theft Auto-style video game. But while the movie does lightly touch on a few existential themes when the main character is forced to grapple with the truth that he's nothing more than a computer program, it's mostly just a lighthearted action comedy, and I don't really have anything insightful to say about it other than it felt weird not to include it in the video, and that I enjoyed watching it. Unfortunately, Westworld kinda falls apart after the first season. But at the end of the third season, it is revealed that much of humanity has been under the control of a powerful AI that makes predictions about their behavior and assigns their social class and opportunities accordingly. In essence, it creates a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy for people by putting them on specific paths based on the kind of life it has calculated that they're going to live. You could say it robs them of their free will. Or something like that. Like I said, to say the show gets a bit confusing as it goes along is a massive understatement. In Determined, Robert Sapolsky makes the radical claim that we shouldn't view people as worthy of blame for the bad things they do, or worthy of praise for the good things they accomplish. But he also admits that as much as he believes in this philosophically, it's a very difficult thing for him to do in practice. Whether or not you think Sapolsky is onto something, or totally off the deep end, I think there's one takeaway that's important to consider. You should have compassion for people who have made bad choices in their lives, because so often those bad choices are simply the result of bad circumstances that were out of their control. And while there will always be stories of people who overcame extreme hardship to achieve great success, in my opinion, these are the exceptions that prove the rule. I also think it's worth extending that same compassion to how you view yourself, because being a human is messy, and we all know the feeling of making the same mistake over and over again no matter how much we feel like we should have known better. Not believing in free will doesn't mean not holding yourself accountable or not learning from your mistakes, and believing in free will shouldn't mean that in any given situation you expect yourself to act with perfect rationality or perfect moral clarity. Perhaps at some point in the future, the technology will exist to link human consciousness together, and maybe that will help alleviate the nagging fear that everyone you know is nothing more than a mindless pea zombie. Until then, however, as much as it feels like getting to finally press the upload button on this video has been a result of choices made by my conscious experience, I have no idea what it's like to be inside your mind as you view this part of the video right now. I can see how many conscious minds YouTube says have clicked on the video, and what percentage of people have reached this part of the video, and I can read the comments you may or may not choose to leave, which I always appreciate, but I don't know what it's like to be you. There's another quote by David Foster Wallace that you may have heard before. You will become way less concerned with what other people think of you when you realize how seldom they do. But of course, the point is not that other people are merely empty-headed robots. It's that they are all too preoccupied with their own main storylines and side quests to dwell on whatever it is you're up to. It's good not to care too much about what other people think, but it's not good to assume they don't think at all. It may be conceivable that you are the only conscious being in existence, but it's hard to imagine a more profoundly lonely way of viewing the world. It's better if we're all the heroes.